Welcome to Stories That Stay, how stories of identity shape who we become. This is a podcast where healing happens at the intersection of art, science, and storytelling. I'm Sean Petros, a therapist, learning strategist, refugee, and reluctant creative.
And I'm Dwight Dunstan, a facilitator, educator, artist, and proud uncle. Stories That Stay is a project of Lion Story.
Together, at Lion Story, an organization grounded in over 35 years of research in psychology, racial socialization, and human development, Dwight and I have spent the last 5 years training thousands of people to confront identity-based stress and transform their stories into tools for healing and change, at home, in the office, online, but mostly within themselves.
Each episode of this podcast will offer practical tools and reflective questions to help you navigate identity and difference with more clarity and less fear. Whether you're an educator, organizer, artist, or someone simply trying to make sense of what you've been feeling in the world around you, you're in the right place.
In our opening season, we'll explore stories of resilience, rupture, and repair, guided by people who have found the language for some of their hardest truths. Fair warning, it will get emotional. But for us, that's the point. We believe, and the research shows, that when we can feel and accurately name our emotions, we're able to heal and resolve experiences in ways that support us in the present and in future moments of stress and intensity.
As we arrive at today's story, we want to take a moment to settle in together. So wherever you are, whether you're walking, driving, or resting, we invite you to take a few breaths just for you. Inhale and exhale. Inhale and exhale. And for the next 45 seconds, continue to breathe just in that manner with this audio reprieve. Our guest today is Lisa Nelson-Haynes, who is the executive director of Lion Story, where she leads the organization's work in building racial literacy through storytelling, mindfulness, and education. Lisa is a longtime advocate for helping people claim their stories as a path to healing and justice. Before joining Lion Story, Lisa was the Chief Programs Officer at StoryCorps, leading national initiatives like One Small Step and the Mobile Tour. Lisa is also the former executive director of Philadelphia Young Playwrights and co-creator of the award-winning podcast Mouthful. Lisa's career has always centered on the power of personal narrative and the belief that everyone's story matters. Welcome, Lisa.
Hello, you guys. How are you? It's so good to be with the both of you today, Sham and Dwight. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
We're so happy to have you here today.
So happy. And before we dive into your first story, we want to just ask you, how are you arriving today? And you know we love scales at Lion Story. So on a scale from 1 to 10, how are you feeling about sharing your story today, with 1 being not stressed at all and 10 being like, whoa, I'm very stressed?
First of all, I feel great. I woke up today excited and curious regarding how this experience was going to be. And I think I might be stressed. Maybe I'm not really stressed at it. I'm at a 2, because I'm here with friends. So that makes it easier.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Lisa. And you were well prepared for the session. Our episode and this whole season is actually formulated around one question we're asking all of our guests. You know this question very well. We've asked dozens, thousands of people this question whenever they enter our doors. And you've actually responded to this prompt several times already. But what I love about the nature of storytelling is how generative it is. So every time we tell our story, we learn something new, we experience something new. So with that caveat, I want to elevate the prompt for you once more and ask you to share, what are some of the earliest memories of difference that you recall while growing up?
Yes, I've been thinking about this a lot. And like you said, I've had the opportunity to share some of these experiences in the past. Before I share that, I think that it's really interesting that I've always had issues with memory, right? There's just certain things. Some people I know, they can hear a song and they can say, I heard that song when I remember that from 4th grade. You know what I mean? And I could never do that, right? I mean, I go to my college reunion and it's like I need to bring a yearbook or something with me to be able to remember everybody. But these earlier memories are so distinct, and I wonder why these are so distinct, but other ones don't seem to stick as much, right? So my earliest memory, it was pretty traumatic. It was pretty traumatic. I was 4 years old, and I was with my parents at a gas station, and I heard um, a white man call my father the N-word. And before I knew it, my father was pounding this guy in his face, just hitting him in his face. There, of course, there's blanks in the memory, but I just remember that my father was clearly just beating this guy up, and this guy had no power to defend himself, really. And I remember, oddly enough, seeing something that was violent in this way. I was very calm. My mother was very upset at the moment and was really trying to stop my dad from hitting the guy, but it took a little bit of time. I would say about a minute and a half for him to just kind of like let the guy go after. And the guy's face was bloody and the whole bit. And my mother was just really upset. She was upset that she thought that my father was going to be arrested or something. I don't know. But I was eerily calm. And in reflecting on why I was so calm, I really believe it's because in my mind at that time, that guy had clearly done something wrong to my dad, disrespected him. I might not have had the language for it, but I knew that my dad's response was because he was disrespected. And I knew that that word was not a word that we used. I knew it was a bad word. So for me, I think a lot of people would be shocked that I thought that my father's behavior was warranted. And there was, again, for me, a positive aspect that came from that, which was don't mess with me or my father. My father, he will take care of it. And it gave me a certain amount of confidence to walk through the world because I knew I could always depend on my dad to take care of that situation. So that was one of my first memories. And then another memory I have, which is much lighter, but still somewhat traumatic, is I remember being in the supermarket line to check out with my mom. Again, I was still 4 years old. And my mother, who's very fair with gray blue eyes, I said to her in line, Mom, how come you're white and Daddy and I are black? And my mom said that would ask that question quite a bit. I don't remember that, but I remember this time when she kind of lost it. And she was just like, listen, I'm black, your dad's black. We're all black, and stop asking me that question. And it was loud enough that other people in other aisles were just like looking at my mom. My mom was exasperated by that. And so I just never did. I never questioned it again. I was like, all right, I got it. I got it there. So, those are things where I don't know necessarily how they're connected, but they were just very definitive moments, for me that I walked away with. And I was young. Like I said, I was 4. So those are my earliest memories.
Can I invite you to take a breath as you are, as you wish, whatever feels good? Ooh, thank you, Lisa. Thank you for sharing. Do I have your permission maybe to ask a few process questions, follow-up questions?
Sure.
To get to the story behind the stories. So the first set of questions I'm going to ask you, you're familiar with them. They're a mindfulness strategy, and that is their initial goal, right? To make sure we are present here as you share the story. And I would say with a sub-goal of reading the metadata that our feelings embody, and even some of our self-talk is telling us about these, our first stories. So one of the first questions I'm going to ask is for you to name any and all feeling you have about the feeling, a feeling you thought you had back then, a feeling you have now. If you could just start to name all the feelings associated.
I would say now, I'm still really proud of my dad. I still am. I still am, even with his reaction. I just feel like he saw himself as not only probably, he was identifying that he wouldn't be disrespected in that space. And he definitely wasn't going to take being disrespected in front of his family. And even though there might have been another way for him to address it, I don't know. He was very clear in that moment. And for me, as I mentioned, it made me feel I felt safe and taken care of. Like no one was wasn't going to, I don't know.
Yeah.
I just knew that he had our backs regardless at all times.
Had our backs. Okay. If I can maybe read back out what I'm hearing, you share a lot of pride. You're proud of your father. Okay. Safe. You felt safe.
Safe. Very
Very
safe.
safe. Okay, I
Mhm.
love the details. Calm. You also felt calm. I think earlier you said eerily calm. That still
Mhm.
holds?
It's almost like, Sham, it's almost like I was watching something on TV. It didn't feel like physically I was present in that space with him in that moment. Like I was watching
Yeah.
something.
That is a great distinction because, there is a dichotomy between eerily calm and I believe you started the story by saying it was traumatic, right?
Mhm.
And we know a bit about
Mhm.
stress responses, a lot about stress responses, right? Maybe when folks feel that they are at their capacity for the stress, they can process in the moment. Typically, there's certain ways that we respond. We're used to the hallmark fight, flight, freeze. I like to throw in there fawn, right? Obsessing over this memory. Do you feel like you would fit into any one of those responses? Fight, flight, freeze, fawn in that moment?
I don't know. I don't remember feeling that. I think that there was a sense of disassociation, honestly. Because I was there, I was watching it, but I didn't feel like I had to run again because I felt safe because he was there. So there was no flight necessarily. And I knew that I couldn't fight the gentleman. You know what I mean? I didn't feel like I needed to get out there and help him or
Mm.
anything like that. I did feel like I wanted to, I felt a lot of confusion about why my mother was upset because I was like, didn't you see didn't you hear what I heard? This is why he's doing. This didn't come from nowhere. There was something. I knew that there was something that caused it.
And your mother's confused. You were confused about your mother's response. Okay.
Reaction.
So confusion, safe, calm, proud. Now, how would you qualify the trauma? You said this was a traumatic experience. What in your body or your mind indicated that?
I think when I noticed how bloody the guy's face was, that bothered me, but not enough for him to stop. But I was just like, oh,
Yeah.
look at all that blood. That's a mess. And I also, my mom looking through the, what do you call that in the car? The glove
Mm.
compartment. I remember her looking for the glove, like if there were napkins or paper towels or something in there to wipe the blood off my father's hands.
And you were in the car with your mother?
I was just,
And your
mhm.
father left the car at the gas station.
And I remember my father hollering to stay in the car, stay in the car.
And I want to thank you for naming all these emotions. That's the first step, right? I want to read them back to you. Proud, safe, calm. There was confusion. Now, emotions are important, but if we treat them as a data point, we want to know more about that. I'm very curious because you said the word disassociate a couple of times. In my clinical brain, sometimes I tend to put disassociation and even mindfulness on the same scale, right? I think the big difference is consent. Mindfulness, you are consenting to noticing and observing and removing yourself maybe from the results of the situation. But when we say disassociation, there's a lack of consent there in a way, right? Your body reacted before any other part of you could. So, we're getting curious about that. So we want to qualify. And I say qualify by just like give me the details of these emotions. Because when you say I'm proud at a 2, that's very different than I'm proud at a 10, right? So if you could give me on a scale to 1 to 10, if you can scale some of these emotions, 1 indicating very little intensity, 10 indicating high intensity. Can you help me understand?
Okay, so for which one? What's the first emotion we're looking at?
You tell me which one is most prominent. Proud, safe, calm, confusion.
I mean, I think pride and safety was like at an 8. And this was the first time. I mean, I can give you other incidents, like all the way through high school where my father just stepped in. And it wasn't that it was physical like that, but there was always, my mother and I were always aware that there was a line. And if we saw people approaching that line, we knew that something was going to happen, right? And so I think that this is just the first really vivid memory that I have. But at that point, even at that age, at 4, I knew that this guy had crossed the line. I knew it.
And that was indicated to you by the physical violence and the evidence of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. But you really elevated safety, that word, 8 out of 10. And
Mm-hmm.
you connect that safety to pride, it seems?
Well, yeah, I was just like, if you mess with him, this is what's going to happen. If you mess with us, this is what's going to happen. Oh, and we have to remember the time. This was 1969. And so it wasn't that folks were so, yes, the civil rights movement and all of these things, but there was still this lingering, because we still have it now, of course, this tension about how you spoke to certain people. So, I was just raised not to kowtow to white folks, right? It was look them in the eye, say what you need to say, keep it moving, right? And this, how my father reacted, was a result of that. That person had crossed the line. My father wasn't having it, right? And, this is how he was going to take care of it. So I know because I've shared this story in mixed company before, and I know that there are some folks that are appalled by his reaction and my reaction, to it. But I also think that there are times when, like I said, I feel like this was a moment that just really has shaped how I've moved through the world. And to a larger extent, it has benefited me. It has benefited me. There's like this confidence that you know how to deal with white folks, and it doesn't have to be physical, but you know how to talk to them. You don't feel intimidated by who they are, right? And I know that that's 1969 is a long time ago, and things have really changed in a lot of ways, but it has, like I said, I've said a couple of times, it just really has shaped me. And I think it's benefited me more than it's harmed me.
And when I say I love this, I'm not necessarily affirming that I love the feelings that you had, but I love your ability to articulate what you're feeling. Because what I'm visualizing is kind of like the most proximate emotions, right? Your response emotionally of pride, safety, calm, right? And then, Lisa, I'm also hearing a lot of feelings about the feelings. The initial one being I would say in some ways, a judgment on yourself on what you remember, don't remember, right? How this story is when shared with others, how it may appear. But there's also clarity because you seem to have found great meaning from it, right? So there's the nuclear of feelings, any other feelings you want to name here as you think about when you share this story or when other people hear this story.
I remember it's been years ago, Toni Morrison was being interviewed by Terry Gross on Fresh Air, and she recounted a story that happened when she was a very young child living in an apartment building with her parents. And there was a white gentleman that also lived in this apartment building that said something that was untoward to Toni when Toni was very little. And Toni Morrison told her parents, and her father went upstairs and pretty much had the same reaction my father had. And I remember Terry Gross saying, "Oh my God, that's horrible. How did you feel about that?" And Toni Morrison said, "Oh, I felt good about that. That man shouldn't have spoken to me like that." And I remember saying, "Oh my goodness, I had that same reaction." And I just think that a lot of times what that said to me is like Terry Gross did not understand the burden that her father was carrying. And he was not going to have his daughter spoken to in that manner. Whatever it was that was disrespectful to Toni Morrison, that father was going to make sure that ended right then and there. And Toni it was almost more appalled that Toni Morrison didn't understand, that Terry Gross didn't understand what she was saying. She was like, "No, my father took care of me." And Terry Gross saw her father as a brute. And I think that's how a lot of people see my father when I share this story with them, as a brute, right? As opposed to a man taking care of his family.
Okay, and what are your feelings about that in particular, the judgment?
I just think that is just like the socialization of how we're meant to see Black men.
Okay, that's a thought.
That sometimes can be physically. I just think that's what that's grounded in. I really do.
I completely agree. But I will say that is a thought. What is the feeling behind that? The classification that they are brute men because they protected their daughters.
The feeling that I have is that people really have a total lack of understanding of how Black men have been portrayed. That if the tables had been switched, when we hear of white women being disrespected by Black men, they've been lynched and all of these other things. The fact that this man only my father gave this man a beat down, that was, to me, there was a little bit of controlled behavior there. He could have gone further, I'm sure, but he got his point across. I go back to that.
Oh, yes. And excuse me if I'm projecting here, any anger on the scale?
Yeah, I was angry at this man. Like, why had he? I remember we had come from some sort of dinner. Oh my goodness, I was in this cute little dress. I had my little white pantyhose on. I had my shoes on and everything. And then it ended like this. Like it was like just this heavy, just like it just dropped. We had been at such a nice, calm, it was pleasant evening with the family that just, had ended in such a violent way. And it came out of nowhere. It just seemed to come out of nowhere.
You're right, Lisa. I'm gonna invite you to take a breath because I needed a breath, honestly. But your emotions are clear. I think you have very clearly named them and scaled them. You know they're present. I want to say, even maybe unapologetically so. Strong emotions, strong memories, imagery. I'm hearing a lot of messaging. But before we get into that, I want to ask, and you always have the option not to answer this question, to scan your body and see if you can locate any of these feelings in your body. Can you locate the pride? Can you locate the sense of safety? Can you locate calm or even the confusion in your body?
Yeah, I mean, I feel it right here, but I also think it's important to identify that the story has become more potent as I've gotten older because I've come to understand certain things. My father's reaction to how his reaction that was not just one incident. To be honest, to be truly honest here, we dealt with that internally as a family as well as externally, meaning that we always knew there was a line with my father you didn't cross. I was talking about that earlier. That wasn't just outside with others, that was inside our home too, the three of us. I'm an only child. And so I think it's important to name that because I've had to come to terms with why did my father sometimes go from 0 to 60 with certain situations, whether it be with me or with my mom or with the both of us. And what I've come to as I've gotten older and matured and learned more about what Black men are carrying, especially at that time, I think all of that has informed how I see and interpret the story now, right? At 4 years old, I didn't have this language. I couldn't say to you, I'm traumatized. I was traumatized by this, or I was proud of, I just understanding as I got a little bit older. And like I said, like my father would just seem to blow up at very small things. Now I understand that all he had to walk through in the world just to get through day to day, that informed, right? And he couldn't turn that on and off. It couldn't be like, well, I'm outside and I'm dealing with this now, and now I'm inside and I'm a different person. No, that he carried that no matter where he went. The sense of wanting to be seen as a competent, strong Black man. And now I have a lot more grace how many years later, 50 some odd years later, because I understand that's not necessarily what he experienced outside the home all the time. And so a lot of times my mother and I would probably we would have to deal with the results of whatever had messed with him outside the home, had disrespected him outside the home, where he felt less than who he was outside the home, that we had to carry that burden because he couldn't just go around keep punching people. That would have put him in jail at some point, that he had to show some sort of control in certain situations where he probably really did want to lash out, but knew that that was not going to be beneficial to the situation long term.
Oh, yeah. I mean, this is heavy. This is heavy.
Mhm.
I'm seeing like imagery of your father. I mean, his response at the gas station in some way being maybe how he wants to respond, and maybe even justly could respond to several other moments in his life. I'm also seeing like the domino effect of the story. I think one of your preambles to it was traumatic. There are several other stories just like this.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is why we do that work. This is why we get to that first story. Been doing this a while, 9.5 out of 10. There's some formula, right? There's some meaning we make out of some of these very first encounter. An encounter seems like a light word to use for this, but it is what we call an encounter, right? An identity-based encounter, a racial encounter. There's 3 involved. We haven't even gotten to the greater context of society, the time, the year, the setting, right? Just the setting within your body alone is giving us a kaleidoscope of data. I'm going to invite Dwight to really come in and help us understand the self-talk and imagery, but I want to push you a little bit more before that. Lisa, because the question, and I love this because even when people answer the question or answer it differently, you always get the answer we need. Because in asking where do you feel in your body, you pointed somewhere I didn't see, but
Yeah, right
your
here. I
chest.
feel it right here, right in my chest
Okay.
here.
But you named it, you held it, and then you went to describe the realities of your father and the complexities he held. I want to bring you back here, maybe even if you want to hold it, if that helps you. Now, you identified the location, and I love that. We really are appreciative of that, but tell me about it. Is it fluttery? Is it full? Does it feel like you had 2 espressos?
And
My
sorry,
dad,
just as you describe it, know that people can't see you, so just be as
right. So I have to
descriptive as you
talk through it.
can.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
I'm holding my chest right now, like right above my breastbone and I feel mournful. I feel mournful because my father passed in 2015 and it was like 2 years of just seriously declining health. And I was fortunate enough to be able to nurse my father through his transition. But I never really told him how, as I said, how I matured, his picture became clearer to me. And I wish that I had the words to express that. I wish that I had just been able to give him that acknowledgement that I know that he did the best that he could, and how sometimes it looked one way, but it was really grounded in something else. It was grounded in love. It was grounded in, I'm going to take care of you, all of those things. And I just wish that because I don't think that he necessarily understood it. So I just wish that then I'd had the language to acknowledge his struggle, he apologized to me and my mom for being so rigid at times, being verbally abusive at times. But I wish I could have said, now I understand that as much as it was hurtful, it wasn't personal to us. It was that we were the only place where he felt like he could express those things, lay that down. And that a lot of times it was destructive to us, but it wasn't about us. It was about what happened once he walked out that front door and what he was confronted with on a daily basis.
And you are mournful about that experience of his, or you're mournful about not being able to express your acknowledgement or your gratitude to him?
Yeah, both of them. I'm mournful that we live in a world where that lacks kindness and grace to folks that are different, that
Yeah.
what I mean? We feel like we can treat people any old kind of way, say on a kind, but not acknowledging that it's going to manifest itself somewhere. Their response, how they process things, whether it's good or bad, is going to manifest itself somewhere. And I'm sorry that I didn't have the words or the skills at the time before he passed to name those things for him, because I know that he couldn't name them for himself. All he could say was, I'm sorry. I know that I was wrong. But really getting into me saying to him, this is what I know now. What I know now is that it wasn't about us. What I know now is that we just happened to be the receptors to a certain extent of the burdens that you carried, the anger that you carried. I think there's something, there's something about Black men that were young at a certain age during the civil rights movement. They were promised something that never was manifested. They thought that if they did what they were told to do, if they went to college, if they did these things, that all of a sudden they were going to have a certain world open to them. And that is not what happened. And so I've had a lot of friends and colleagues that have very similar stories as I do about their fathers kind of being like hard asses. That hard ass came from a place of disappointment.
And protection, it seems.
Right. So I just, this is what I've come over the years to understand. And it has offered me the opportunity to see my father in another light.
And your body, again, I want to bring you back because we really are really qualifying
Yeah, I
this
mean,
for.
my eyes, what do you say? My eyes are watering now. My eyes are crying. You
Okay.
know what I'm saying? Like I'm feeling it through my eyes.
Okay.
The emotions coming through here, right? And like I said, I've shared this story before, but I can get very emotional because I'm just like, who wants to walk around carrying?
Yeah. And we don't want you to walk around carrying it unduly, right? You want to
Right.
carry it in a way
Right.
where it allows you to make meaning. It gives you a formula in a way. And you name new feelings: mournful, regret,
Right.
still in the chest,
And like I
in
said,
the
the
eyes.
eyes, just crying, just
And, Dwight, I know you hear this. My goodness, all the self-talk, there's so many messages. But yeah, we can get a little curious around the things you're saying out loud to us, and we're picking up as a message, and maybe the things you received.
I think that this, like you said, my work has always been around narrative change and all of this. And so I think sharing the story with you and processing this also demonstrates how our narratives constantly evolve,
Mm-hmm.
right? If we put in this work and things like that. And so if you had asked me some of these questions, let's say 7 or 8 years ago, I might not have the understanding that I might not have had the same understanding then that I do now.
Mm-hmm.
And so my narrative around my dad and my relationship with my dad has evolved because I've come to understand certain things,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Mm-hmm. Lisa, it's been quite a journey on my end just listening to your story. And we know this work so well that as soon as someone starts to tell their story, you're with them in theirs, but also your own story comes to mind. And so my dad was younger than your dad, but he grew up in Philly
Right.
and in the 60s and
Uh-huh.
was hard in so many ways and tough and protective. And, your story, and this is the power of our stories, is helping me to have a new level of grace for him. Those things he was promised,
Right.
but didn't receive, and the ways that disappointment got lived out. So I just thank you in so many ways as a black man and who was raised by a black man, just getting to hear your story of your black father. There's something that's just healing for me. So I thank you for that. And I want to just invite in this work, you calculated the emotions, you located them in your physical body, and you've already done this, and gonna just ask if there's anything else coming to mind. But we talk about communicating. So if there's any images or self-talk come to mind, you brought us into what you were wearing that day, your mom reaching for the paper towels in the glove compartment, these really vivid images, the red, I imagine there's just red in your
Right.
father's hand and this guy's face, all of that is swirling in some of the self-talk coming up. Any other images or self-talk as you were sharing, or as you now have some new insight and, have calculated feelings about this story?
Yeah, I remember we got home and my father was washing his hands in a sink in the basement, and how quiet and calm he was about it. There was just, like I said, there was just like this calmness that and again, I now think that that just came out it wasn't just his reaction to what was said to him in that moment. It probably was pent up from a lot of different things. And unfortunately, that cat said the wrong thing at the wrong time to the wrong person. And that my father needed to get that energy out of him. He needed to have to be able to respond in that way. I mean, there was authenticity there in that response. But again, I don't think it was just towards that one individual. It was probably 10, 20, 100 people in front of him that kind of pushed him to that place. And this is how it was released. And then I also have images of as he was in his final years, how physically he was diminished, because my father was very big and broad. He was like 6'2", 6'3", and very strong. And then, the last couple of years, he had lost a lot of weight. He was on a feeding tube and all of that. And just trying to understand that those two images still exist in this one person. But I think almost up to when he passed, I still felt like he would still do his best to do whatever he needed to do to protect me and now his grandkids, his family. That fierceness was still there inside of him, even though physically he probably would never be able to do something like that again.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also very grateful that I still carry that confidence with me, even though he might not physically be here. And so, yeah, I'm trying to, like I said, being able to speak to him, being able to tell him how grateful I was and how I moved forward with that and how it's manifested its way differently with my own children, because it was never a physical response, but there was going to be a response. There was going to be, this was not going to pass. We're not going to let this go. When they were in elementary school or middle school and certain things would happen in those environments that I didn't feel they should have had to handle to manage. It was for me and my husband to come in and step in to do those things. And the importance of addressing those things as quickly as possible, because I wanted my kids to understand that someone always had their back too. It wasn't going to be in a physical, that was not our thing, but there would be something.
Yeah.
I'm really curious, like that this first memory, right? Of this experience. If there was a tagline, a hashtag, a message that whispered to you in your ear, what was it? Like, what was that self-talk? I have an idea of some of the words, but if it was a directive.
Yeah, it was just like, don't mess with us. Don't, you know what I mean? Like, don't mess with us. Don't, like, this shit, it's going to stop right here. You might have had one pass. That's it. It ain't going, you're not going past this, right? It's not going to happen. We're going to address it.
That is the most Lisa thing ever. So don't mess with us. We are going to address it.
Yeah, just don't, I mean, and I think that again, I mean, I was very clear with our kids about that. Do you know what I mean? Like, we're going to try to give you the tools to address things on your own. But once we find that maybe if that didn't work because you were a certain age and the adult or whoever didn't respond or what have you, that then we would step in. But we would try to give them the tools, whether it's with a teacher who might have kind of gotten out of pocket or something like that, or something on the playground, or you know what I mean? Like, no, it wasn't going to necessarily be physical. That wasn't going to be it. But there had to be a way of self-advocacy, addressing things, holding people accountable, right? Because again, not having the words, you knew that you felt something when it happened that didn't feel good. And so in order to right yourself, you had to address it.
A calibration of the
Right.
greatest extent, but yeah, a calibration.
Excellent word.
And I think that's what you saw. While there was, objective violence, right, which anybody could probably agree to, bystander or otherwise, the way you've articulated the imagery for me, it was more of like he had no choice but to release and express himself. No choice. And this was one of the few moments that publicly, the right time and place, he was able to do that. We can have a whole other interview on, I wonder what the consequences of that were, right? But this expression, like a disruption, if you will, of this is my humanity.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's...
And I believe that his health diminished at somewhat of an early age. I mean, he wasn't even 75 when he died, right? But it's the years of that stuff building up that manifests itself in how your health is. The high blood pressure, diabetes, all of these things, right? Because you didn't have a more healthful outlet for the indignities that you felt you had experienced.
Yeah, you swallow.
Didn't have the language, all of those things. I believe that's what it was.
And I do see...
I'm sure it was extremely frustrating.
I do see, and I want to guide us to take our breath. I do see this wonderful poetry with you as like an architect of storytelling. Because in a way, that is a great story. My body had to express myself. There were no bounds that I could regard in that moment. And I'm sure the type of man he was, he's already cued in where his daughter is, his child, if others are watching, right? But when we talk about the stories of our life, we bring it down to what is our body doing? Because that is a great story. Your body had no other means of expressing themselves or felt as though, but to pick violence. And violence, is something is a crude reality, and not acknowledging it incites more violence, I would say. Not acknowledging the social emotional violence people go through, it's a quick way to, I think, justify other forms of violence. But Lisa, as an architect of storytelling, as someone that's doing this mindfulness work, as someone that has given us the great pleasure and privilege of hearing and experiencing this story with you, and I'm holding my chest as I speak. As a tool for you, is there a way you can, if you were to name this story, right? If you could put it in a jar for yourself so you can open it when you need it, right? If you can name this story for yourself and yourself only, what would it be?
That's challenging. If I could name it, I mean, it's something between the don't mess with us, but the need for outlets, the need for acknowledgement, the need for accountability, the need for there's that whole, like, if you know better, you do better, right? Well, we know better now that when we get to that place of we're not going to take it anymore, that there's other outlets for us, right? There are other things like get out and take, like, go on a basketball court. Like, my father played basketball. Like, you know what I mean? Like, if he had known better, he would have had another healthy way of releasing that, right? But at that time, the time of his lifetime, we didn't know that those things were more helpful. And so therefore, this is almost like the best that I have right now for you. This is all I got. This is where we are and what I got.
Oh, yes. This is where we are and what I got.
Yep.
Maybe an optional alternative. Don't mess with us. We're going to.
Don't mess with us. Right.
Listen, and that's ringing true.
Mm-hmm.
We are going to address this. Oh, Lisa, thank you. And can you scale that 1 to 10? How maybe accurate those titles feel?
Well, that's really like an 11 or 12. Like, I just like I said, having this understanding, learning these skills, knowing that there are ways for us to self-regulate ourselves in a way that is not physical in that way, in a harmful way. I think that so many people, there are millions and millions of people that would have benefited from that, as opposed to other self-destructive things. Like, my father didn't drink. My father didn't do drugs. Like, I mean, I can't even imagine if he had been someone that drank. What his world would have looked like at that time. But yeah, not having the skills of how to self-regulate, I think, was highly detrimental and kept him from experiencing joy. That's another manifestation I think is important. Wasn't just harmful to those that he lived with or he might have physically harmed. It was harmful to himself. Whew. Now, y'all know I got a busy day, and y'all got me all up in here now.
You know?
I know.
That's
I know.
you know. And so grateful, Lisa, and just moved and inspired and heartbroken and prideful and reflective. There's so many feelings going through me. For our listeners, we want to invite you to take a moment. You were just witness to and accompanier of Lisa's story. As we turn away from this story, we're going to give you some different ways to be with what arose in you. And so stay with us until the very end, but we're just going to close out our time with Lisa before we move into our final mindful moment. And Lisa, you started off by just sharing a little bit of how you're feeling about sharing your story on a scale from 1 to 10. And we talked about, 1 being not stressed at all, 10 being like, wow, overwhelmed, and just returning back now that you've shared your story. If you could just scale on a 1 to 10, and maybe it's a new feeling that you just have that you want to just scale. What would that feeling be, and where is it on the scale?
I think right now I'm at 8, but I want to clarify why it's an 8. I think that what you shared earlier, Dwight, about hearing my story and then it making you self-reflective of your experience with your father. Another way that we're socialized, especially Black families, is we don't talk about these things enough. We don't share them enough. And I really think that it's important for us to share them because it takes us out of isolation of thinking it's something that only we carry. And we can learn so much from hearing each other's authentic stories. And I think that fostering a community where people feel brave enough to share these things, that let going of the judgment that someone is going to see my father as being a bad person or something like that. That wasn't the case. People are complex.
Hmm.
And I think that this space that you and Sham are working to expand on, because Lion Story, of course, this is the work that we do, but to expand and being able to bring it to larger audiences is just what we need right now. We need to not be isolated, to not navigate these very challenging times that we're living in, thinking that we are the only ones that feel this way, that we will learn from each other if we create these spaces and encourage people to share these stories, that we will see how connected we really are and we can help each other. And I think it's also important for us to understand that, you don't necessarily, it's not about getting over this. Something can happen and it'll bring you right back to this place again, right? And also, hopefully, every time you take the time to reflect on it, you learn something more. I think that's important too, to learn and see something more.
Absolutely. So we'll settle into our chairs. If you're listening, this might be in motion. You might be sitting, listening to this, however you are. Just begin to bring some awareness to your breath. But Lisa, as you're sitting in your chair, just do a thoughtful, intentional body scan. Just notice any places of release, places of tension, places in your physical body that might want a little bit of extra love or squeeze or just some breath into that space. And we'll take 3 breaths in together, and we'll do this by breathing in for a 4 count, holding for 5, and then out for 6. Let's take a breath in, hold, and out. Breath in, hold, breath out. Our last breath all together in, hold, breath out. Thank you again so much, Lisa, for your courageous storytelling, your bravery, for the ways you've honored your father today, your family, yourself. So we know this work is emotional, for bringing your emotions forward, for trusting Sham and I to hold this story with you, and our listeners to hold this story with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. And I really appreciate you guys taking the time to listen and to walk me through these practices. I also want to congratulate you on this inaugural episode of your podcast. We really do need this work. And so thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm sure it's going to be a huge success.
So until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep telling your story. And remember that you are your most important listener.
Thank you so much for tuning in to Stories That Stay, how stories of identity shape us. This podcast is a project of Lion Story. To learn more about Lion Story and our work, visit lionstory.org. This episode was produced and edited by Peterson Toscano. Our music comes from epidemicsound.com. Music during our mindful moment comes from Dwight Dustman. For our listeners, know that we are here to help you build the real courage, practical language, and skills to navigate discomfort with clarity and compassion, starting with yourself. If you found value in today's episode, please consider leaving a review, subscribing, or sharing this with someone who needs it. Your support helps us grow our healing community with practical learning resources and training opportunities for individuals and communities that need these tools and skills.
Until next time, keep listening, keep learning, and keep telling your story. And remember, you are your most important listener. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.